That's all we need. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me this week I have Brad. How are you, Brad?
Good, mate. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. I mean, we're kind of in a bit of a Groundhog Day, I feel, with City. So I've had Logan, I've had Dan, and now yourself, and it's been pretty much the same results every week. So it's the same conversation with different people, I feel like. Unfortunately, another 1-0 loss to discuss. But, lost to Coventry. I try and look at the silver linings in this game and the fact that last week Dan and I sort of said, just give us something, give us a change of formation or personnel, bring Emmanuel in for Coyle, do something. And we did see changes made. We saw Emmanuel come in, which was good to see. We saw Eve starting up top. It was almost a 2 up top formation. I think Fletcher in commentary was sort of saying, we had KLP and Eves basically playing up top and Moncur probably sitting in behind them more than anything else. And then even switched to the 3-5-2 in the second half, all to no avail in the end. But if you're kind of grasping at straws on positives to take out of the game, at least we're trying something new.
Yeah, look, and I think I'm normally the first to jump on the negative bandwagon a bit, but the one thing that sort of maybe impressed me a little bit was we actually had shots, and quite a few of them. And we've not so much in recent weeks, but we've moaned for about probably sort of 6 or 7 of the last 10 games that we've looked pretty ordinary and never really looked like scoring. But in this game, you could pretty safely say that we had some chances. We probably still didn't look like we were anywhere near a top half team, but against a team that's sitting where they are in the league, it still shows that we could do it. It maybe is just that point that I know you and Logan talked about a bit as well, as just having 1 or 2 players that aren't really up to this standard that are, pushing us through like a Smallwood did last year in a lower division. This year, who's really driving us as if we are where we should be?
Yeah, and I think especially with Honeyman missing the match with an illness, it sounds like, so nothing too serious. It feels like there's not a whole lot of, as you say, we're creating the chances. It's just we're not creating clear-cut, tangible sort of chances that we could turn into goals. I think I saw the stat today put up that of all the championship teams, we have the lowest conversion of shots into goals or chances into goals or something like that, which feels pretty accurate at the moment. It just feels like it's a real slog to try and even just score a goal, let alone win a match. It's hard to believe after looking at last season's results and the way that we were so free-flowing and free-scoring in League One, and the players just haven't been able to step up as much as we would have hoped. We're not expecting them to go out and each score 20 goals a season in the championship, but 10, 15 goals shouldn't have been out of the realm of possibilities, and it just doesn't look like happening.
Yeah, I think that's probably the more important bit that you mentioned there is, you can talk about where we are on the table and these sorts of things and where the promise might actually come from. But if you aren't scoring goals, what chance to give you? It's almost like saying if we went down 2-1, it would have been such a better result. But when you've got teams that can effectively score a goal and then sit back and absorb, then to some extent, not that they sit back and absorb, but you know what I mean? It gives other teams almost an advantage in game plan, knowing, well, these guys aren't that threatening.
Yeah, and they'd probably go into a game knowing if they score 1 goal, they've won the game because they know they're not going to put up much threat. Yeah,
exactly. And then probably the stat that probably interests me a little bit leading into the game is where I thought we might pinch a draw is that Coventry haven't got a really what I would say is top 4, top 6 defence. They've scored some goals, that's good, but they're really where they are because they've ground out some results. So if you've got a chance to score multiple goals or at least try and get on the sheet, this is the team that you want to have a crack at. Just disappointing, couldn't be done.
Yeah, I think I saw the stat last week that they'd only conceded 3 less goals than us or something like that, which just shows in a sense it shows fine margins, but it also just shows how much better in attack they clearly are than us, and in terms of getting results on the board through scoring goals per se. It also probably shows a little bit that we're not actually conceding that many goals as well. We're losing a lot of games 1-0.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair point. If in fact I think Derby's position on goal difference is pretty tight, but I would say in the bottom half, I mean, we know we've got the worst goals for in the league, but defensively, we're probably actually just sneaking into the top half.
Yeah.
On goals against, but it's just no good if you're that poor in front of the sticks.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at it now. It looks like we've conceded. What column am I looking at here? So we've conceded 21 goals, but we've got Peterborough in 20th who've conceded 31. We've got Reading in 17th who've conceded 27. You've got QPR in 11th who've conceded 23. So we've conceded as many goals as Luton, who are sitting in 6th. So it just goes to show you, they've scored 26 goals to our 9, which is where the difference lies.
And I mean, without, I know we'll get to the actual game itself, but when you look at it realistically, we lose 1-0, we don't score again. Sure, we shifted things around and there were some positives in that, but again, probably with the goalkeeper and at times the defence being as good as they were, it could have easily been a couple more.
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask you about that. So with the goal that Coventry actually scored, diving or a stooped header, I guess you'd say, from Godden for Coventry. Greaves playing him on side. It's one of those ones where I'm not quite sure how to feel with that. Where are you critical of Greaves for playing him on side, or it's just one of those, we thought we'd cleared the ball, they got it back, and were able to fire it into the box, and it's just more unfortunate than anything with Greaves' positioning for it.
Yeah, look, I think you could probably have a look at a string of things there that caused it. I mean, Greaves, probably paid him onside, but you could also argue that the way that, the ball came in, did we have enough pressure all around that whole passage of play? No. So I think it's pretty hard to pick specifically on him. But I think as well, that probably sums us up, is that it's these silly mistakes that cost us. It's not like we have been devastatingly poor defensively and lost against a team that was absolutely smacking us around. It's just that good teams don't make those silly mistakes.
And it's a bit of a head scratcher as well, because again, the cross into the box comes in from the right-hand side where we had Emmanuel playing on this occasion. But the last few weeks where we've been a bit vulnerable on that side and we've had Coyle there, I mean, there's been a few fingers pointed at Coyle, but obviously you've changed that up now with Emmanuel and it's still happening. So, and we didn't even have Wilkes on the pitch, who some were sort of saying wasn't tracking back, dropping back to help Coyle out when he was playing. So it's a bit of a confusing one that we just seem to continue to get targeted on that side to the opposition's success.
Yeah, look, it is. And probably the best sort of sum up I could give on that as well is, I heard McCann's interview afterwards and talking about the fact that, we've got to stop conceding these silly goals and, that makes it hard for us. Well, the one thing you can say is we just talked a minute ago about our goals against puts us at mid-table.
Yeah.
So I think he's got to change his mindset to say, hey, listen, every team in this comp can score against us.
Yeah.
So we've got to score either 1 to get a point or 2. It's pretty easy. And at the moment, we just don't look like we really want to score. It's like we really want to defend first. And I think the only way we're going to fight our way out of this is certainly trying to score more goals. Even if we do concede them, we've got to pick up points. We're not going to do it with 1-0 results.
Yeah, and it's just strange after that Middlesbrough game, or after the Blackpool and Middlesbrough games, really, where we scored in consecutive games. We scored 2 against Middlesbrough. I really thought that was a run where we'd start to get a bit more confidence back. And I guess maybe it was the international break coming at a poor time to sort of disrupt the momentum. But it just seems like the players are a bit scared or uncertain on trying to take those chances and score goals, and just missing that sort of creative spark to make their way through defenses and get into good positions to score. It's pretty frustrating. I mean, Lewis Potter is probably one of the more dangerous or creative players that we have, and he's not even managing to do too much lately.
And that's a really good point, mate, because that makes you start thinking, well, hang on a minute, are we dialing back the attacking play a little to become more defensive because we're worried about teams scoring against us? I mean, that Middlesbrough game is a prime example of a game that, by rights, I didn't think we were great. And in fact, if you talk to a Middlesbrough supporter, they probably thought that they should have at least got something from the game themselves. But we managed to put 2 in and hold on. And it's more because we took a few chances.
Yeah.
And that's what we're not seeing enough of. I mean, even the Stoke game, we know that going to Stoke's always a hard, task, but at least we went down 2-0 and it wasn't through real lack of trying. And it's the same. But you don't mind going to Stoke and losing 2-0 when you have a crack, but at home against Coventry, you expect to score. That's really what the mindset's got to be.
That's right. And as you sort of said before as well, it was to the credit of Ingram and the defence that it wasn't actually a few more that they scored. I think there was one where they were through on goal in the first half where Ingram put in a great display, a great save to keep them out as well. So sort of looking at our performances, he's almost player of the season, which, as we say, we actually haven't conceded as many goals as you'd expect to have to be where we are on the table. And that's largely or solely down to Ingram's performances.
Yeah, look, it's funny as well because I know we talked at the start of the season about, keepers and first choice and non-first choice. He's really done everything we could ask and probably more considering where we sit on the table as well. And probably could be the fact that if we do get out of this hole and push ourselves away from this relegation point, a lot of it will be what he's been able to do early doors as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then I guess the other one in defence to touch on is Bernard, who's putting together a fantastic season. I think, I can't remember if it was on last week's episode or just in the chat or something like that, where I was saying, if there's any possibility of bringing him into the club on a permanent deal, I think we should try and look at doing it because he seems just the latest off a line of recruits from the United Academy who are doing a job for us.
Yeah, and I think it sort of goes back in time a little bit with, the last time we had our Premier League run and those ex-Man U guys, they're well drilled. Their academy's got to be one of the best in the world for a reason. And if we can find a way to commit to him long-term, well, you just got to do it. And it should be a pretty obvious sort of decision to make already, really.
Yeah. And then lastly, I guess we did have McLaughlin come on in the second half when we did switch to the 3-5-2. I thought he looked great. I think he sort of joined Bernard in the aftermath of the game saying that he thinks the 3-5-2 suits us much better, gives us much more confidence or solidity in defence. Didn't concede in the second half, so there's the argument to be made that it's a formation that seems to work for the players. I guess the question marks would be around the creativity that allows for us and whether we can score the goals in that formation, but certainly seemed to be a positive, and he certainly looked good when he came on.
Yeah, look, he did. And I think as well, probably like you said, we know really that Bernard and Greaves are quality. Elder, we know is quality. Like we've got the players at the back that we should be able to trust with three and just have a crack, really try and create something. At the moment, without buying an out-and-out new striker, the goals are going to have to come from the one or two guys leading that line, but we know that we can make it a lot easier if we've got a pretty attacking midfield setup.
Yeah, certainly.
And that's definitely the benefit of having all of those shots. The goals will come, but we've got to just be able to say, well, look, we're attacking first and defending second.
Yeah, no, that's it. And allowing for Emmanuel and Elder to get forward more, push up, support the attack. It might well mean that we can get more crosses in the box and get some goals as a result of that, which is definitely what we need at this point of the season.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, in that case, before we move on, I might grab from you your 3-2-1 votes for this game, and then I'll give mine, and then we'll move on to the flashback feature.
Look, I think probably I'd definitely give 3 to Ingram. Actually, I'd probably give 5 out of 6 of the votes to Ingram. But yeah, I would give Bernard a vote. I really did like it. There's something there that shows that he's absolute quality. And I think at the moment, we're probably still not even seeing all of it because of the way we're playing.
Yeah.
And we have a day out and he will look just like a rock.
Yeah. No, I agree. Ingram definitely man of the match for me as well. That save in the first half especially. I thought Moncur looked really dangerous in behind as much as he could. I think I saw a stat the other day that he's got the highest passing accuracy in the championship or something like that, which could well just be because he's getting the ball a lot. And, lots of short passes, maybe it's not too hard to hit a target. But nevertheless, still to be leading that stat when you've got a side like Fulham and Bournemouth in the division who have a huge amount of possession, is a pretty commendable statistic for him. And then Bernard, yeah, as you say, I think especially the 3-5-2 formation, I think we can see the best of Bernard. It gives him a bit more confidence, a bit more support in defence, and then lets him get forward a bit more as well from set pieces and other things like that. So certainly think there's more to come from him for the rest of the season.
And probably there as well, mate. You want your best players under the most pressure. If we're talking about trying to fight our way out of a bottom couple of spots, let him have more time. Let him soak up more so we can concentrate more up the pitch. I mean, we know he can do it. We've already seen that him and Greaves especially, we already know what he's proven. But this kid at, what is he? Is he 21 or 22 or something?
Yeah, 20 or 21, I think, yeah.
Right. I mean, he's done it in many, many appearances before this season.
Well, I was going to say, he was playing in League Two last season as well, so it's a pretty commendable step up for him.
And I think probably the reason why he was probably an easy pickup is the fact that he looked head and shoulders above everyone in League Two as well.
Yeah.
So what we've got to do is basically start backing ourselves a little bit and say, well, we've got a guy here that we know we can put some faith into. Where else do we need to look? Because that's certainly not an area I think we need to worry about.
No, definitely. I think we just need more goal scorers. Which is a nice segue into our flashback feature this week, which the question I have for you, Brad, if you can name the 3 players in question, the question is, can you name the last 3 players to have scored 20 or more goals in a season for us?
Oh, crikey. Okay. I would definitely, obviously, say Hernandez. Actually, no, did you say last 3?
The last 3 players, yeah. So any division.
Any division. All right. I'm trying to remember how many did Wilkes score last year? Look, I would have thought if I was just pulling names, I would be saying Bowen. Crikey. For the last 3 years. Bowen, Hernandez definitely scored 20.
Yeah. And then the third one's a long way back. If that maybe that helps. Okay. It doesn't help. I'm not talking 90s. Like it was in the mid noughties, but he played for us through a few of the divisions.
Okay. He was really a winger, but he could score.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he loved his reference to the Father above when he scored.
He did indeed.
It's I can't remember Elliot, but
indeed.
Stuart Elliott.
Stuart Elliott. Yeah, well done. You got all 3. You
made me second guess. 20.
He did, yeah, in the 04-05 season. I think he got.
Well, if you didn't 20. Say the mid noughties, mate, I'd be stuffed. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
You made me second guess myself on Wilkes because I thought, oh, hang on, I'm sure I looked this up, and yeah, Wilkes got 19 last season, so he didn't quite make it. So I was a bit relieved with that one. Yeah, I think it was the. I think in fact it was all 3 of those were in the championship. So he scored. Or actually, no, it was in League One. I think he scored 27 goals. That's right.
Wow.
So 27 goals from Stuart Elliott, 4-05. And then Hernandez, I think, got 22 or 23. And then Bowen got 25, I think, in his last full season with us. Yeah. So, I thought we're talking
Elliott,
about
mate, at 24, 25, I would have thought he just scraped 20.
Yeah.
But that's huge.
No. He was very good for us in League One, and then I think was still reasonable in the Championship. And then I can't remember. This was sort of before my time following City, but I have a feeling he got injured or something, and then he came back from injury and was still okay. But then we were sort of starting to progress and look. We got we're looking for players of that sort of Fraser Campbell coming in 07, 08. I I'm sure people will correct me on this. As I said, it's before my time, but I think he sort of just moved on from the club at some point. But for a few seasons there, he was very prolific for us.
Oh, and not just that, he just there was games. I can't. There's a game somewhere, and I don't think it was Blackpool, but we played somewhere at home. It was, and I think he scored 4.
Yeah,
and it was a game that we were actually even worried about whether we'd get a point out of, and this was a real game we had to try and get something out of it. And he either scored a hat trick in the first half or he scored 4. I remember it, but he was blessed with something in those couple of years, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at it now. So he moved to Doncaster in the 2008 January window because he wanted to stay in the area, which is kind of interesting because he was a Northern Irish international, I think. And so obviously I wasn't from the area, but must have enjoyed his time in Hull so much that he was quite happy to stay in the area when he moved on, which is fair enough. And of course, Bowen, you look at Bowen's scoring record when you consider that he was basically just starting out with us. For his first 3 seasons, I think he got 17 or 15 the first season and then over 20 goals in the next 2 seasons. And you think if he'd stayed with us another season or 2, he was on track for, surpassing Windass and some of those guys for goal scoring for us, which is just remarkable from someone who's, 22, 23.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how long exactly he played for us, but Stuart Elliott was one of those guys that was easily running at one stage there at like 0.75 of a goal a game or something. He was going bananas. I mean, it does help when you score 3 or 4 in one game, but that run that we had there, considering you had Delaney behind him at fullback scoring goals too at times, it was like we would have hated to have played against that side.
Yeah. And then speaking of Jared Bowen as well, he scored for West Ham against Villa on the weekend at the same end that he scored his first professional goal, which was pretty neat to see. It was a nice sort of callback to that first game under Leonard Slutsky. And, I mean, it's a bit of a shame in a way with Lewis Potter that he does have such a recent comparison where we sort of look at Lewis Potter, we look at Bowen, and we think that Lewis Potter should be up and running and scoring 10, 15 goals for us like Bowen did. But so I guess it's a bit of a curse that he's got that sort of role model in that sense. But Bowen was a special player for us.
And the other thing as well, I mean, obviously, what did we actually get for him when he left?
20, I think, 22 million maybe.
So what do you reckon he's worth now?
Easily double that. I mean, he's showing, he had a bit of a slow start this season, but he's showing in the last couple of games, especially the qualities that he has. And I'd not be shocked if, first of all, I wouldn't be shocked if he gets an England call up in the near future. But then wouldn't be shocked if a Liverpool or he'd probably suit a Liverpool, maybe. I would have said a United, but they seem a bit overstocked with wingers at the moment. One of those. Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked if he made that sort of move in the next year or 2.
Well, I mean, so you think he's close enough to an England call-up?
Yeah, well, I'd seen a few sort of comments or speculation on it because of his performances for West Ham in the last month. Again, I mean, England have a lot of wingers as well, so it'd probably be one of those meaningless games for England as a first call up just to see how he goes. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him around the squad over the next season.
Well, I mean, Jimmy Bullard got a call up, so that says something, doesn't it?
So anyone can do it.
Yeah, that's it.
I can't remember who it was. Some player playing in the championship or something recently where they were talking about how he'd had an England call up and no one could understand it. So you do get some odd players who do end up managing a call up. So, it was Dominic Solanke at Bournemouth has an England cap. And you think, he's not too bad, but must have been when he was playing for Liverpool or something like that. But you think if Solanke can get a cap, you'd think Bowen can't be too far off.
Well, we know how good he is. That's why I was interested in,
really
how much he'd be worth. And that's the same with so do we know roughly what the price would be on Bernard's head if he was available?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he just before joining us on loan signed a new long-term deal with United, I think a 4-year or a 5-year deal. So that's probably the biggest stumbling block is obviously United see a future for him at the club. it would therefore take a pretty hefty fee, maybe in the region of a 10 or 15 million pounds, which is probably or definitely beyond us at the moment. New ownership, who knows? But it's the sort of thing where I'd sort of see about at least getting him back on loan next season with a view to a permanent if we were to go up or if certain clauses were met, and try and work it like that. Because I can't imagine, I mean, he's having a terrific season, but I can't imagine he's ready to step up to the Premier League just yet.
No.
So you would hope that they might be open to a second loan move next season.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a totally almost different player, of course, but you look back at when Harry Maguire first joined us in those years where he was getting frustrated not getting picked and those sorts of things. And there's a lot of similarities there to say, well, you just need a little bit of a run and a bit of maturity to be able to say, yeah, I am the real rock of a defensive unit, especially going up to Premier League. The quality of the strikers is just astronomically better.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot to like about him.
Oh, yeah, no, certainly. And it was Maguire, he went on loan to Wigan, I think, that first season he was with us. And then in a way was almost fortunate that we got relegated, so he was able to play for us in the Championship instead of going out on another loan, and then sort of naturally progressed up with us in that next Premier League spell. But yeah, certainly I don't think there should be any rush to get Bernard up into a Premier League club at this stage.
No, I think he could just stay with us for a bit longer.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. Cool. Okay. Well, we do have a game tomorrow morning, which I think is only about 9 hours away, which would be good fun against West Brom, managed by Valerian Ismail, who was previously at Barnsley up until last season, had them up in the playoffs last season, which was pretty impressive given, I suppose you can look at it in two ways. The way that they've fallen off since then is maybe more down to Marcus Schopp, who we'll talk about the Barnsley game in a little bit, but he's lost his job in the last few days. But Ishmael did a great job at Barnsley, and he's not doing a bad job at West Brom. I know there are some murmurings around their club around the style of play and expectations, and it's always difficult. Like I look back at when we were relegated under Bruce and then went back up after the next season, but everyone was quite expectant that we'd be top two and sort of walk the league, and we went up through the playoffs eventually, but you sort of get a sense that West Brom fans are feeling a bit the same, that you look at Bournemouth and Fulham pulling away a little bit at the top, and West Brom are probably a bit frustrated that they're not there with them. And so there might be a little bit of pressure on Ishmael. They've I think, lost their last two games or two of their last three games, I think. So they've only got 2 wins in their last 5 games, actually. So probably a little bit of pressure, but their home form is very strong, and it's one of those games. It's hard to hold out too much hope for a result, but I guess stranger things. We did get a 0-0 draw with Bournemouth, so I guess stranger things have happened.
Yeah, look, and I think probably the only thing that helps us is there's pressure on them. And we look at the form guide, we're already expected to lose, so it's not really going to be a surprise if it does happen. But the only thing probably that still concerns me a little bit when you dive right into the sort of analytics of this is that the 2 games they've really lost if you like, is pretty much both away. And I think it was Stoke and Swansea, I think. And obviously Stoke they're around mid-table and not setting the world on fire, but Swansea actually aren't a bad side and probably could end up getting close to the playoffs. So really, when you look at their form guide, the 2 games that they've dropped out of probably their last 3, they probably would normally drop anyway. So I don't think it's an over concern for them, except for obviously if they lost against us, well, the earth will shake and there'll be a lot of pressure on all sorts of people, but not as much on McCann. So at the moment, I think it's probably one of those ones where you're expecting to not get a point. But the one thing I want to see is at least a goal or 2, or really just let's go out there on a night where we shouldn't be expected to get anything. And just show that we can mix it. Yeah,
no pressure. It should be a really relaxed performance in that sense, at least. It's not we look at the Peterborough game, we look at the Derby game and those fixtures around us where there's a lot more pressure and expectation, but this one is almost a free hit in a sense. So it should be a good game in that sense, at least. It's a very strange championship division this year, as you just touched on there, Stoke, who have a lot of ex-City players, and West Brom as well. It's, there's a few clubs out there with who are sort of like old boys city clubs, with Snodgrass, Livermore, and Townsend in the West Brom 11. It'll be an interesting reunion with those guys when we play them. So, bit to look forward to in that sense as well.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what happens when you have a lack of real investment from owners and changing managers, is you end up with I won't say graveyard, because a lot of them are still pretty good, but you end up with a lot of discarded City players around all of the leagues that we actually want to be good in. And they're all still doing the job at other clubs. I mean, I know obviously Livermore and Snodgrass were Premier League players when they left us, so they had to go because, well, we weren't a Premier League club anymore. But you do sort of wonder, hey, look, I wonder if just one or two of these guys were still with us. You've got still Roch, Kearney running around at Fulham thinking, well, how good would it be if he was still with us, and those sorts of things. So
I think Corey Evans is still somewhere as well. So there's,
he is. I saw his name a couple of weeks ago. I'm trying to remember where it was.
Oh no, okay. He's just gone to Sunderland, so he's in League One now. But he was up until recently just at Blackburn. So he'd been at Blackburn with he joined Blackburn when Kearney went there. So he was at Blackburn for quite a while.
Oh wow! Well, if he's gone to Sunderland, that's the end of that.
So anyway, changes for the side. Would you be happy to try and sort of stick with? I mean, the team we put out wasn't actually that bad against Coventry. I quite like that formation, those personnel. Wouldn't mind to see Emmanuel get another go at right back, and even Eves up top. I wouldn't mind seeing again. I think he's at least, unless Tyler Smith's coming back into the side, I don't think Magennis offers much more than Eves. So be happy to stick with him as well.
No, look, I'd echo all of that. In fact, I think the fact that you want to have we saw enough there to show that there's some interest, if you like, in keeping that sort of structure. So I think you're crazy to make too many changes unless there's a recovery issue.
I think it was Smallwood went off injured, so probably just him for Honeyman if Honeyman's fit.
Well, if you can, that's actually to be honest, it's probably the best fit.
Yeah.
Because that sort of more energetic grit in the middle there is probably what you need to try and straighten that up. But I agree with you on Eves. I know he's much aligned. I know we hear from 1 minute to the next, the world's going to end, and then it's not. But he does suit this type of formation if you can give him enough time to get into the right spaces. And I'm not saying he's our way out of that bottom 2 or 3, but we've got to try something. And I think it's got to be a bit more attack-minded. And so at least knowing that you could have Smith at your disposal or something, if you need to change it up, well, that's good. But what have you got to lose?
Yeah, exactly right. Probably the bigger game, and then sort of talking about the Peterborough and the Derby games that we've had so far, we've also got Barnsley coming up this weekend. And the title of this episode is that it's a decisive week in City's season. And, on and off the pitch, I think you look at the fact that Barnsley have made the call and sacked shop during the week to try and get out of this hole that they've dug for themselves. And, I know that with all of the talk about the takeover and the period of exclusivity and all of that people probably suggest that we can't sack McCann at the moment. You sort of hear, like some of the comments I've heard is that perhaps there's some sense of, well, if the Allams leave McCann in charge and the results keep going poorly, it might just hurry the prospective buyers up to force their hand to just try and rush the sale through and make their own decisions and put their own man in. But it certainly makes for an interesting perspective at the moment where all the teams around us are sort of, Forest have changed their manager and surged up the table. Barnsley have now changed their manager. It does sort of leave us cut adrift in that sense, as well as on the table. So it's only going to be an interesting game against Barnsley as well.
Yeah, look, it is. And I mean, if you want to really, other than the change of manager, if you want to really have a look in the mirror, this is who we're looking at. This is the team that is almost in identical position to us, has looked hopeless at times. But then again, although we'd say, look, their problems are pretty much the same as ours. I don't think they bleed goals. I haven't looked through all their fixtures, but I would say they don't bleed goals. But
yeah, they've only conceded one more than we have.
Right. So they're really mirroring our problem. Is they don't score any.
Yeah.
And I think they're realistically only sitting, if I remember when I looked the other day, I think we've actually got one more win than them, but we've also got one more loss. So they've clearly got through what you would say is a few boring nil-alls, which we haven't been able to do. So I think the key thing is that you keep trying to do what we're doing against West Brom tomorrow night, but then when it comes to Saturday, it's just got to be all out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They've lost their last 5 games now as well, which is clear. I think it's 6 or 7 that they've lost in a row, which is what's led to the sacking. Cardiff lost 8 in a row and then sacked not Warnock. They sacked McCarthy, and I think McCarthy's actually being rumoured as being linked to the Barnsley job, which would be interesting. Bit of a musical chairs there for them, but
wow.
It is always an interesting one, I suppose, with managers that they can look awful in one job and then go to a new job and suddenly revitalize the club and look a whole lot better. So that would certainly be interesting. I think Barnsley play Derby tomorrow morning as well, which is a pretty huge game as well at the bottom of the table. I think, depressingly, if Derby win that game, then they're only 1 point behind us despite their points penalty, which would be saying something. But yeah, look, I mean, that Barnsley game's clearly the more important of the two in the sense of if we can get a result in one of the 2 games. But how do you feel about the Barnsley game? Do you have any sense of confidence that we can get away with the win?
Look, I do actually, because I think probably what will happen is that either it's really going to work tonight in the West Brom game, or sorry, I shouldn't say work as in we'll get 3 points. The formation, or there'll be some sign of life there, if you like, that will give us enough to think that, hey, we can mix it against West Brom away. Now we've got to go and take on someone in our neck of the woods, if you like. Then I think we will get something out of it. But the one thing that still concerns me against West Brom is, and I'm not even worried if it ends up West Brom scoring 4 or something like that, we've just got to score, because we cannot go anywhere near Barnsley without any sort of goal run, because they're in the same boat. And it could end up being a pretty entertaining game, funny enough. But if we don't see that sign of hope from the West Brom game that we can actually do it, even if it's for 30 minutes, it could be enough that takes us through the Barnsley game, and it gives us enough. Plus, I don't think Barnsley's record at home is anything to hold a candle to either. I mean, I know they've lost less games than us, so we think our home form's bad. I imagine theirs is not much better.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I guess there's always the worry of the new manager bounce. I guess we'll see if they've appointed a manager by Saturday. But look, if we're going to turn our form around anywhere, I mean, if we went out and got a result against West Brom tomorrow morning, even just a draw, which I keep kind of looking back at that Bournemouth game and thinking, well, if we can get a draw with Bournemouth, who are sort of flying at the top of the table, clearly we're doing something right. I mean, granted, that game was a little while ago now, but if we can get something against West Brom, or as you say, even just scoring a goal, getting a bit of confidence, we can go into that Barnsley game full of optimism for a result, I would hope. I could certainly see us getting something out of it. A 1-0 or a 2-1 sort of scrappy win would certainly do me at this stage, and just sort of get us back on track a bit.
And look, I think it's that whole sort of fear factor, if you like, about, okay, well, what if we didn't perform against Barnsley? Then we're all basically defeated. But the one thing I do, look, if you look at the players we've got, we can actually be pretty combative. And there's games where I know if we were in the crowd there live, we'd be cursing and swearing as much as anyone. But the thing that I haven't minded at times, and I know it's not a great consolation when you look at the Luton game or even the Coventry game the other night, but even the Peterborough game, we looked ordinary for big patches and then just turned it on and became pretty combative. And I think that'll be the interesting thing to see is that Barnsley haven't had a good run, but I don't fear Barnsley being that much of a combative group that we're not going to be able to break them down. The thing is, you've got to get some practice at it, and we just haven't been really doing it for long enough periods. Nearly every game we've played this year, we have shown 20 or 30 minutes where we can mix it. And the Bournemouth game was a prime example. Were we the best team on the park? We definitely weren't. I think we barely took a shot in the first half. But against what effectively is, a Premier League hopeful team, we matched it with them for at least 60, 65 minutes. man on
Yeah,
man.
that's right, and it's just about taking our chances when they do come, which we're just not really doing at the moment. But we're getting those, as you say, we're getting those spells in games where we're the dominant team. And there was that Peterborough game was when we equalised 1-1. We went into the second half. We won the penalty, which we then missed. But we were just pressing them for that 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then we just sort of, I guess we tired out, and then they caught us on the counter. But as you say, I mean, you put 1 or 2 goals past them, as we did against Middlesbrough, and it's a whole different story.
Yeah, and I can't help but think as well, this is maybe where, you could probably do a whole episode on whether the manager's the right man for the job. But the thing that worries me a little is that when we're in this position in the championship last, the creativity might have looked like it was there on paper, but it doesn't seem like from the training ground through to Saturday much changes. Yeah. And I know you would know better than anyone. We used to bag Steve Bruce because his answer was to throw 5 guys up front when we're behind and all that. But there was times there where at least the players would back the approach, and it wasn't all new. We still laugh about Harry Maguire getting thrown from centre half to basically centre forward against Arsenal. But clearly at training, they did it.
When we were talking about Maguire's career before, I was like, that first season, I reckon he had more appearances as a forward than as a defender.
I did. I still remember
West Ham game. I think we had no forwards who were fit, so he started the game at centre forward, I think, or came on at least.
I can't remember if it was an FA Cup match or a league match, but I remember with about 15 minutes to go, he threw. I'm pretty sure it was at the Emirates. He threw Maguire forward, and Arsenal looked like they were the second-rate team. Yeah. And it wasn't like he was a genius and taking guys on, but it was almost like it gave the team a structure. And the way you could move the ball down the park wasn't going to be rebounding straight back at you. And I think sometimes all that I worry about with McCann is he's clearly done it in the division below because we've got the talent to push naturally through teams. We walk through them. But in this league, when you've got, effectively 6 to 8 Premier League hopefuls minimum, you've got to have more than just plan A. And I still reckon that's one of the reasons why Brucey was so successful in getting teams promoted is he would throw shit everywhere just to see if it would work. But clearly it wasn't like I'm going to throw him forward and he's never done it before. He would work on that sort of stuff. And I wonder sometimes whether McCann really has 3 or 4 opportunities to change things up on paper, but then on the training ground, it's not really implemented, or we're not running through, like even the rustiness of this 3-5-2, I'm surprised how well it worked because it didn't look like we've been training it that hard.
Yeah, and I was surprised over the international break after the Borough game that we haven't put more effort into it, considering how successful it was against Borough. And you look at last season, a lot of our set pieces seemed very well worked from the training pitch, and it just feels like this season there's no sort of fluidity or fluency coming from the training pitch at all. It doesn't seem like anything that we've worked on or prepared works, or that there's nothing that we've actually prepared to begin with.
And I think probably the best example, and I mean, it's easy to talk when it's not your team, but I was talking to a Preston supporter and said, look, you guys have been going all right. What do you think the difference is? And he just said, just a bit of consistency in the formation. Yeah. He said, we're not going to end up in the top 4 or 5 or 6. He said, but they moved to a more rigid 3-5-2. I think he said it was in a League Cup match. And he just said he was surprised that they tried it, but clearly at training, they've been working their socks off with it. And I think he said even, I think they played QPR and they went down, I don't know, 4-2 or something like that. But he said it was still actually a really good performance because they stuck with the plan. And he knows against QPR it might not work, who are pretty attacking and can move the ball reasonably quick. He said, but we should be able to beat half the teams in this league if we can play that way because they're so disciplined.
Yeah.
And Preston's lineup is nowhere near on paper. It's not streets ahead of us, but at times it just looks like they are.
I still can't figure out how we beat them 4-1 on the first day of the season.
I know. but I think that's probably the answer, mate. They adjusted pretty quick to saying, right, clearly what we thought might work's not. And so what are we going to do about this? Well, we're going to turn this around and try something different and go to the training. I mean, that's what the training ground's for. But we haven't seen anything. Well, it doesn't appear to be anything really structurally changing going on other than throwing a few blokes around. And to be honest, that 3-5-2 on the weekend worked because of a bit of natural talent. That's what that was.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we can start to see a bit of a turnaround of form, a turnaround of luck and chances tomorrow morning against West Brom, and then again on the weekend against Barnsley. 2 big games coming up this week. So thank you for joining me to talk about them, Brad.
No, thanks for having me, mate.
No worries, and thank you everyone for listening in. Hopefully we're back next week to discuss some pretty successful performances against West Brom and Barnsley. Or actually, I don't even think it'll be next week because I think it's the international break, isn't it? So we'll be we have one more game before the internet. I was right the first time. So it is the international break starting next week. So we'll be back the week after to discuss those games. And look ahead to the, I think it's the Birmingham game, is it? I think the week after that, which will be a pretty big fixture. Oh, no, it's Coventry next. Not Coventry, Cardiff next. So we'll be back to discuss that game, to preview it, as well as these games where hopefully we'll have picked up a result. So until then, come on, City.